would you guys settle down already? The teller's here for UFC Louisville. Let your tush start to absorb into the cush. Let all those nerves get out of your body. You're going to enjoy the next hour or so as we dissect this entire card. You guys know we're talking the betting lines. We're talking how these fights are going to take place. We're going to predict who's the winner is. We're doing method of victory, all that type of stuff. All right, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. And all of you guys, if you can, like this video. Don't make me pause again, put my feet up and start sipping on the coffee while I wait. Just get to it promptly. And this way we can start diving into this card. Appreciate you guys. All right, so this card is headlined by two top 10 middleweight fighters, Jared Cannonier and Nassourdine Imavov. A huge fight for both men, but I'll let you guys know right now, no matter who the victor is, they won't be fighting for the belt in the next fight after this, okay? Even though Jared Cannonier would have then been on a 3-fight winning streak if he gets the job done in the main event here, I still don't think he's going to be the next man up. Of course, we have Israel Adesanya taking on Dricus du Plessis, but you have Robert Whittaker taking on Khamzat Chimaev on June 22nd. Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa just faced off this past weekend. You got a lot going on. Brendan Allen is on a huge winning streak. So we could talk more about that later, but maybe the winner of this fight is taking on Brendan Allen. I don't know. I could easily see Khamzat Chimaev getting an opportunity at the belt if he gets past Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker's name still holds a lot of weight. His 2-fight winning streak is above a Cannonier 3-fight winning streak. So just some things to think about there. I've seen people throwing some shade at this fight card, but I will tell you what, there are some sleeper fights throughout this card. There's some fighters returning to the cage, coming off some layoffs where they were getting knocked out left and right, and we may continue to see that trend for those fighters. So don't be surprised if you see quite a few knockout finishes throughout this fight. Yes, I'm talking about Dominic Reyes and Dustin Jacoby. Reyes' chin has been completely diminished, and Jacoby's a very talented striker. That's one to keep an eye on there. Some UFC newcomers, Zachary Reese in his UFC debut, he got starched by Cody Brundage in the first round. So he's stepping back into the cage there in the co-main event. Miguel Baeza has been out of the cage for over 2 years. He's been having some major issues with his chin. And guess what? They're throwing him in there with Punahele Soriano, a guy that just throws from the hip. I'm excited to see Eduarda Moura step into the cage. This girl seems to be a very talented fighter. I think she can make a run in this division, and Denise Gomes is talented too. So just some fights to note before we dive into the card. But all throughout this fight card, I mean, even the Charlie Radtke versus Carlos Prates fight, that is a fight that really, really intrigues me. I think both of these fighters are absolute studs when you take into consideration how early on they are into their UFC careers, okay? They do have some fight experience and they're not young, but both those fighters, very promising. All right, guys? So I'll leave you guys with that before we jump into the first fight. I just want to let you guys know we are powered by BetUS. Sign up through the link in the description of this video. You're getting a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. There's no other sportsbooks giving the same type of deposit matches as BetUS. So do your guys self a favor and take advantage of those bonuses. They go a long way. All right. And then check me out on Instagram, man. I am just 1,070 followers away from hitting that 10K. I really want to hit that 10K, boys. If you can help me out there at MMA Fortune Teller _. I got all types of funny content coming your guys' way over there. When we hit 10K, we will post some dope free play videos here on the channel, and they will cash for you guys. So you help me out over there, I'll help you out over here. Appreciate you guys. Let's go jump over to the first fight.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA Fortune Teller. Yeah.
The MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have a rematch taking place in the women's flyweight division. Andrea Lee taking on Montana De La Rosa. This time, neither fighter has a rank next to their name. The first time they fought, which was about 5 years ago, Montana De La Rosa was the number 11th ranked fighter in the division. Andrea Lee was in the top 10. I believe she was like 7 or 8 at the time. So both those fighters lose their rankings. Both these fighters have been losing quite a few fights as of recently. But I will note that they've been fighting high-level competition. So Andrea Lee, had success in the last fight, just being the aggressor on the feet. She was the fighter that was kind of dictating the pace, marching forward, landing the jab at will. That's something that we've seen consistently in Montana De La Rosa's fights. She is there to be hit. We'll go over the numbers here in a second, but even the numbers are a little bit skewed. I mean, when they're standing and when she's in striking range, she's a fighter that is there to be hit. And not only is she there to be hit, Montana De La Rosa is a fighter that opens up often. She's typically very bloody in her fights. Her nose, it must have some kind of damage where it's just her nose constantly seems to be bloodied up and broken when she's in the cage. But I could see that being something that takes place in this fight. I could see Andrea Lee's pressure and some of her straight shots coming down the pipe and opening up Montana De La Rosa. I expect to see Montana De La Rosa doing something similarly to what she did the first time these fighters fought, which was shooting takedowns, trying to get the fight down to the mat. Now, she did have some success, I guess you could say. The first time around, there was a couple takedowns that she secured, but all in all, Andrea Lee was defending pretty well. She was making her pay with her failed attempts. She was landing strikes. And the game now favors Andrea Lee in that type of fight even more so. As you guys know, since their last fight, the judges' criteria is favoring damage a lot more so. For you to go out here and to bank on Montana De La Rosa maybe getting some control time and sneaking off a decision, I think you should have less faith in that scenario nowadays, even compared to back then. And she wasn't able to have enough success the first time around. If you do want to play devil's advocate, though, the thing that Montana De La Rosa has going for herself right here is that she's now 29 years old. She's a much more mature fighter. At just 24 in the last fight, she's obviously learned so much more since then. And then you could try to question Andrea Lee as she's 35 years old. Is she starting to get over the hump? I think that Andrea Lee has more to offer the game, at least just for the next couple of years or so. As we mentioned, fighting high-level competition. A lot of people thought she should have had that W over Macy Barber. That victory carries some serious weight. In fact, she should have got the nod in the fight. Let's be honest there. So that was a big victory for her. The other losses were against Miranda Maverick, Natalia Silva, an absolute stud up-and-coming fighter, Viviane Araújo, a high-level fighter there as well, a fighter that also has a victory over Montana De La Rosa, fighter that beat up Montana back in the day. I think that fight took place back in 2020. So, I won't go on too much more about this fight. I mean, I'll be very clear. I do favor Andrea Lee going out here, getting a W once again over Montana De La Rosa. Montana De La Rosa just a little bit lethargic with her movement and whatnot. I like the fact that she, of course, is married to Mark De La Rosa, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and a dude that's obviously going to continue to sharpen up her skill set as she hits her physical prime. But Andrea Lee's been traveling around training with high-level fighters like Tisha Torres, Raquel Pennington. She's just been very dedicated to the fight game, and she's also a fighter that is, I believe she's married to him. I don't know, married or dating, but she's been with Tony Kelly, an ex-UFC fighter. So she's another fighter that has that relationship with a male UFC fighter, an ex-UFC fighter at that. So I like Andrea Lee to get the job done here, and I will take her to win a decision once again. I say she gets the job done just as she did the last time, via unanimous decision, landing the more fight-impacting strikes, bloodying up Montana De La Rosa, and avoiding being subbed as well. So even if Montana can sneak a takedown in here or there, I don't feel that she finds that submission. Lee's only been subbed once in her entire career, way back in 2016. She's pretty sharp defending down on the mat, and I don't think that Montana finds that sub, and eventually Lee will get back up, or the next round will kick off on the feet, and Lee will be the aggressor. She will outpoint Montana De La Rosa. Now, the line opened up at minus 140 for Andrea Lee over at BetUS, touch minus 145. It's now at minus 130, which by no means is that steep of a line. I have no problem with that line at all if you guys are wanting to target Lee. I will say this, a women's flyweight match that could potentially play out close. Sometimes you guys know how women's MMA could be, but all in all, I will say I'm more on the side of being comfortable favoring Lee to take a decision victory here in this fight. We head over to the men's bantamweight division where we have still undefeated Daniel Marcos taking on John Castañeda. Both these fighters originally coming off Dana White's Contender Series. Now, different seasons. Castañeda fought on DWCS a while back. He hasn't been the most active in the UFC throughout his UFC career, but as of recently being a little bit more active and coming off a pretty dominant victory over Hyung Ho Kang, where he won that unanimous decision 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Looked pretty good in that fight, if you ask me. Was just the more well-rounded fighter and dictated the pace in that fight. Now, I think you can argue that he is a more well-rounded fighter compared to Daniel Marcos. Marcos is a fighter that definitely favors his striking. Marcos has shown that he is a fighter that wants to keep the fight standing, and he wants to use his technical kickboxing to dictate the pace and control the fight and get a W there. Castañeda has shown flashes with his submission skills. He's shown he could hurt you on the feet as well. He's been in wars. He's been in some wild fights. Of course, if you guys remember the fight that he had against the Shootbox product not too long ago, and Daniel Santos. That was a fight where he hurt Santos very bad early on in that fight, and then he eventually was knocked out. If it wasn't for that loss, if he would have got that knockout there, he would have been on a 5-fight winning streak with the submission victory over a fighter like Miles Johns, victory over Mune Gafarov. Mune Gafarov is a fighter that some people have some respect for, but he's had some up and down performances. So, but notable names, if you will. I do like what Castañeda brings to the table. I've been watching him a little bit on his YouTube channel. This is a dude, it was some old footage, but this is a dude that definitely puts in some work, and he's dedicated to his craft. But, as I say that he may be the more well-rounded fighter, what I see, though, being the most likely scenario in this fight is a fight where Daniel Marcos is going to have success keeping this fight standing. He's showcased pretty good takedown defense throughout his career so far. I think he'll be the more technical kickboxer. He's more technical defensively. Castañeda can get a little bit over aggressive at times and his hands get a little low. I like how Marcos is just more technical, has the hands up high, and I like the leg kicks that he throws as well. I like the calf kicks that he attacks with. I think he could have some success there. The way I see this fight playing out is Marcos having enough success keeping this fight standing and outpointing Castañeda on the feet, where also, though, if Castañeda gets a little frustrated and really looks to open up, I could potentially see Castañeda getting countered with a nice little hook or something like that and getting hurt in this fight. I think that is a possibility. Castañeda with 2 knockout losses throughout his career there. But again, showcasing to be a more well-rounded fighter offensively with 7 knockouts and 5 submissions. He could do a little bit of it all. Marcos, not one submission victory yet. This is a fighter that will look to keep this fight standing. I have a feeling that he will be able to keep this fight standing and will slightly out-volume Castañeda. That's the most likely scenario. I'm going to say Daniel Marcos wins a decision. Doesn't necessarily dominate this fight. It plays out somewhat close, but he'll be a step ahead, landing some impactful calf kicks. And I think that we see the Daniel Marcos that we've seen on Dana White's Contender Series or in his last fight, which let me just note real quick. Although his last fight was a no contest against Kyling Ayori, that was a fight where he was en route to getting the job done. He looked very good before the accidental groin strike happened. He looked very good. He opened up Kyling Ayori with a knee. He bloodied him up, and he was en route to getting a W there. He was much more aggressive offensively. It was the Davey Grant fight that was the questionable performance where he was very hesitant in that fight and arguably should have lost that fight. But I think we see more of what we've seen from him when he fought on DWCS or in his UFC debut against Simon Oliveira, where he got the finish there. And I think there is a possibility he gets the finish, but I would lean towards a decision victory for Marcos. He opened up as a -150 on BetUS. He's now a -115. This line, the line on this fight has pretty much been pick 'em straight across the board, dead pick 'em odds. So you're picking your poison here. I feel a little bit more comfortable being on the Marcos side of things. And actually, I will say some sports books have a very, very slight lean towards Marcos, but from what I'm seeing on a lot of sports books, we're seeing dead even odds. I feel more comfortable being on the Marcos side. And stay tuned to the prop video that we do for this fight card, as this may be a fight where we talk about. We head over to the welterweight division, where this fight actually may be my most anticipated fight throughout this entire card. I'm very excited for it. As of now, they have this as the third fight kicking the card off, and I don't understand why that would be the case. And that may not hold up. They may adjust the placement of this fight, because this is a fight that should be on the main card, if you ask me. Charlie Radtke taking on Carlos Prates. Both of these fighters have shown to have a great deal of potential in this division. Charlie Radtke coming off a devastating knockout victory over Gilbert Urbina, completely broke down Gilbert Urbina, and Gilbert Urbina is a well-rounded, dangerous fighter. Okay, and the moment that fight kicked off, it's like Urbina felt what Radtke was bringing to the table, and Radtke was just the bull in there. He was just controlling that fight and eventually landed his knockout shot. Before that, had the decision victory over Blood Diamond, where he showcased that he has good fight IQ and took the best path to victory there, where he was able to use some wrestling and clinch control over the kickboxer in Blood Diamond. I like what I've seen from Radtke. One thing I will say as well is I'm a big fan of his personality. I love fighters that just let it out there, man. They really just, they don't hold back. They let it be known how they feel. I like fighters that talk shit to the crowd. I like all that type of stuff. You guys know that's my cup of tea. It may not be for all of you guys, but I like fighters that are polarizing. I got the Conor McGregor poster over here on the side. I like fighters that do not hesitate to stir the pot up and make these fights more exciting for us. So I know there's going to be some fighters some fans out there that are just kind of more on the side of, they shouldn't say that. There's always going to be those types of dudes out there that are a little sensitive and are going to say that, just stick to what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be a fighter. And let me not go too much in on that subject there, because maybe I'll rub some of you guys the wrong way, but I'm a Radtke guy. Okay, I'll let you guys know that right now. But I'm also very much a Prates guy when we're talking about fight style and fighting ability. This dude is super rangy for the division. He's a nasty Muay Thai striker. The knockout victory that he just had over Trevin Giles was beautiful to watch. Completely flatlined Giles. Let's be very clear though, he was losing that fight before finally landing that big strike and flatlining Giles there. He was down on the scorecards, and he probably was on his way to losing a decision, I would say, because before he landed that strike, he would have been down rounds 1 and 2. So he needed to finish essentially, where Trevin Giles outlanded him 68-37. Giles also at the minute and a half of control time. Prates was consistently looking to land those step-in knees. If you guys remember throughout that fight, he's a fighter that he has a lot of confidence in his overall Muay Thai skills. And sometimes I think that's a dangerous style. When you're trying to land those step-in knees, they're awesome when they land, but when you're just avoiding strikes by centimeters and inches, as you see these hooks just flying by the fighters' faces as they're trying to land that knee, it's a double-sided coin. Yes, it definitely carries weight if you could land it, and it could also prevent certain fighters from trying to press with the wrestling and whatnot as well, which Radtke may be looking to go that route. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Prates throwing those knees up the middle and whatnot to threaten Radtke if he goes that route. But if Radtke kind of fakes with those and then comes over the top with some heavy hooks, I'm just letting you guys know right now, do not be surprised if we see Radtke get a knockout in this fight. Prates showed he is there to be hit. Even though he's very dangerous and he'll land on you and he'll finish you, he is there to be hit himself. So Prates has been on a solid win streak. Finished Mitch Ramirez on Dana White's Contender Series. You guys know Mitch is a fighter I have a lot of respect for. He's a tough dude, and he was putting it on him in that fight. And shout out to my boy Mitch. They really put him through the ringer. If you don't know the whole story with Mitch, McGregor gives him the boot from the Ultimate Fighter show. Then they match him up with Prates in the main event of that DWCS episode. Then they gave him a short notice. I believe it was a short notice fight against a fighter that we'll be talking about in a little bit. The very talented Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt American top team product in Thiago Moisés. So shout out to my boy Mitch. But Prates is definitely the real deal. He's a very dangerous fighter, but he took his fair share of losses early on in his career, and I think that just had a little bit to do with him figuring out the overall MMA game. I think he came into to the sport of MMA with that kickboxing background, took a couple subs early on in his career. I think that he's definitely refined his defensive grappling. Like I said, submitted 3 times early on in his career. I do not believe for a second that he's the same fighter that he was back then. But you also take note, maybe Radtke can get a hold of some type of choke, some type of power choke. I mean, but I wouldn't necessarily bank on that. To cut to the chase, the way that I see this fight playing out is, for the most part, this is going to be a straight up kickboxing match where either fighter can have major success landing a big strike in this fight. I do expect that Radtke will look to change levels and will look to clinch a little bit more so than Prates. So that will be a little bit of the X factor in this fight, is Radtke kind of mixing things up. Trying to make Prates not get too comfortable in there in a straight up Muay Thai type of fight. And listen, I'm going to pick Charlie Radtke to get the job done in this fight. We're going to get to the line here in a second. Radtke is an underdog, and I have a great deal of respect for Prates, but I do have some question marks in regards to him from what I saw in the early and majority of the fight against Trevin Giles. Okay, so and you mix that with the fact that Radtke is red hot right now as well. So this is a fight that should be much closer than Radtke as a plus 165, in my opinion. I think that this fight should be much closer to pick'em odds. I am buying in that Radtke's the real deal, so Prates is the real deal too. These two men are going to clash. There's a couple different scenarios that could take place. I'm going to say that Radtke gets a knockout. I'm going to say that Radtke lands a big hook in this fight as these guys are going to war, as Prates is looking to land his own damage, and he probably will have some success early on, but as they go to war, I'm going to say Radtke lands a nice, tight, crisp hook, uses that footwork to get in range and just turns it over, a nice solid hook, and cracks Prates as Prates is looking to throw a knee up the middle. How about that? All right, that's a beautiful story right there. We'll stick to that, right? We talked about that earlier on. Let's say it plays out just like that. As they're going to war, Prates throws that knee, trying to time a knee up the middle, and Radtke fakes changing levels and just steps in with a nasty hook and starches Prates. I'd love to see it. So you guys know I think there's more value in the Radtke line. There's no question about that because I'm picking him to win the fight. Prates is dangerous, but give me Charlie Radtke to get a knockout finish in the beginning half of this fight, first round, potentially beginning of the second round.
This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Solid matchmaking here in the lightweight division. Two fighters that don't currently have a rank next to their names, but either one of these guys can easily be a ranked fighter in the near future. Thiago Moisés, he's taken a couple losses throughout the last couple years, but against high caliber competition, and it's part of the game, man. He had some growing pains. This is a fighter that got into the UFC very young. He's still only 29 years old, which is crazy to think. He's still a maturing fighter, a long-time American top team product, a dangerous grappler, a fighter that's wrestling and striking has came around a long way. Ľudovít Klein, on the other hand, this is a fighter that fights out of the southpaw stance, comes in with that action figure type physique, has big fight ending power, comes off a first round knockout over AJ Cunningham. Just note, AJ Cunningham is a fraction of the fighter that Thiago Moisés is, but still props to him for going out there, getting the job done and doing what he should have done. He's been handling business as of recently. Went to that draw with Jai Herbert. Other than that, though, defeating Ignacio Baja Mendez, Mason Jones, Devontae Smith. But let us not forget his first two losses in the UFC, which came after that spectacular first round knockout over Shane Young. But then he went out there, got stifled by Mike Trizano. Mike Trizano changing levels and frustrating him and defeating him via unanimous decision. And then after that, he gets submitted by Nate Landwehr in the third round. Got caught in a choke there, and the wrestling kind of cost him in that fight throughout as well. So, I do have some question marks about his grappling. I know that he's obviously working on that. Well, he's more of a kickboxing based fighter, has dangerous fight ending power. Oh, man, but Thiago Moisés is a fighter that should be able to manage distance a little bit. He throws out some nasty calf kicks as well, and I think that eventually Moisés can time an entry to some grappling. Maybe he can get on Ľudovít Klein's back and sink in a choke. If he gets this fight down to the mat, I think that Moisés will be a far step ahead. And, I like Thiago Moisés here. I do. I think that he's a well-rounded fighter. He's a true pro. And it's not really a slight towards Ľudovít Klein because I really like the work that he's been putting in. But Thiago Moisés to me is just a true pro. And I think that I'd rather be on his side right now, right here in this spot. I like his overall skill set. I like the tools that he brings to the table. I feel like he's the fighter that's just coming to the cage with just a few more tools in his toolbox. Where Klein may have that big old hammer, maybe he has a bigger hammer than Moisés, but Moisés has this little hammer with him. He's got a chainsaw, easy whatever. I guess you wouldn't be carrying a chainsaw in your toolbox, but you guys know what I'm saying. He's got his monkey wrench and all that. And I just like being on the Moisés side of things. Now, Ľudovít Klein, it's funny. I'm curious if any of you guys had the same type of feeling. For some reason, he reminds me a lot of Uros Medic. But both fighters, big fight ending power. I don't know. They kind of remind me of themselves a little bit. Big time potential, but need to refine their grappling and overall skill set. And with time, they're both proven to be good fighters. But I like Thiago Moisés here. Now, Klein will have a 2-inch reach advantage, even though Moisés is 2 inches taller. I'm not too worried about that. I think Moisés can close the distance here, work some calf kicks and close the distance and use his grappling. He will need to use his grappling. If we want to play devil's advocate here, though, I will just mention Thiago Moisés has been knocked out and finished in brutal fashion in his 2 last losses against BSD, Benoit Saint-Denis, like I said that, guys, and then also against Joel Alvarez. The Alvarez one was a tough one. He was caught with some nasty uppercuts early on. I think he just kind of made some mistakes there. Let's just say that. I think that if that fight took place more and more times, I think that you would see Moisés actually get his hand raised a lot of times in that matchup. But he made a mistake there. It cost him. But the Moisés that we've seen against Christos Giagos, Mel Costa, just showing those submission skills, just went out there and destroyed Mitch Ramirez's legs. We were just talking about that before as well. And submitted against Islam Makhachev. Just, he's been fighting high-level fighters, man. You take a look at all his losses against Demir Ismagulov, Benil Dariush. These are high-caliber losses in the UFC. Islam, Joel, Benoit, Saint-Denis. I think that Moisés puts it together here and gets the job done. And I'm going to say, why not? I'm going to say that he finds a submission victory in this fight. I'm going to say he sinks in a rear naked choke. He gets on the back of Klein and sinks in a rear naked choke. All right, so let's take a look at the betting line here. You're going to note that Thiago Moisés is a slight underdog. He's a -105 on BetUS with the comeback on Klein at -125. So that does make Moisés a slight underdog, although the line is very close. I've seen Moisés as high as a +105. You can catch him at some dog odds like that. And I just feel more comfortable taking Moisés here, so I will take him to find a submission in this fight. So about a year ago, when Jared Gordon had to pull out of a fight with Jimbo Miller, the future Hall of Famer, unfortunately for Jesse Butler, his phone began to ring, and he picked it up, and they asked him to step in on short notice and take on that said man, Jimbo Miller. The rest was history. If you guys remember how that fight played out, one of the most devastating knockouts that we've ever seen in the octagon. Jesse Butler gets folded up against the cage, flatlined. It was a brutal scene. And really, when you took into consideration that Jesse Butler finally reached the goal of fighting in the UFC, which was his dream to do, and then to step in there with a guy that, if I remember correctly, he admired very much, a guy that he kind of looked up to in Jim Miller, that had to be a very surreal experience for him as he woke up and kind of comprehended everything that just took place. You would expect that he would be as motivated as ever for this second opportunity to fight in the UFC. He's taken on Brad Katona. Brad Katona, a 2-time Ultimate Fighter winner, a fighter, if you guys remember, I was doing my tough recaps. A fighter, you guys know I'm not a fan of his personality, to say the least. These type of dudes and me do not mesh at all. But as far as his fighting abilities, this is a guy that really leaves no stone unturned. He's a guy that really puts in a lot of work, and you got to respect that, okay? And he can go out there and outclass certain types of guys, okay? He's just a true pro. But as far as his personality goes, I would never want to be chilling with him or grabbing a drink with him. He doesn't seem like he's a fun time at all. But I mean, this let's be clear. Brad Katona is the biggest favorite on the card here against Jesse Butler, okay? We'll get to the line in a second. He's right around a 5-1 favorite. with Jesse Butler just taking that knockout loss, you got to have question marks about his chin. But you also note that Brad Katona is a fighter that only has one knockout victory throughout his career. He's one of the most boring fighters to watch. There's a reason why, after winning the Ultimate Fighter the first time around, and even having victories in the cage, the UFC was quick to part ways with him. Okay, I mean, make no bones about it. I'm surprised the UFC even gave him the second opportunity, and I think that the UFC would be quick to cut him with a loss or two. I really do. His last performance was not a good one. His last fight where he lost to Garrett Armfield, that's a fight that he should have went out there and took, but Garrett Armfield, using his reach advantage, which Katona consistently comes in with a reach disadvantage, Garrett Armfield was able to stuff takedowns and use his boxing skills. The difference here, though, is that Garrett Armfield's a fighter that actually shows to have some promising striking skills. Jesse Butler has not impressed me with anything that I've seen from him standing. He's more of a grappling-based fighter, and I don't think he's going to have any success against Katona in that field. And on the feet, Katona should be able to pepper him up with volume and just take control of this fight. You can stroll through his entire resume, and you're going to note that he doesn't have any really respectable victories as you dive into the level of talent that he's faced. I mean, a submission over Ray Trujillo, maybe a fighter some of you guys are familiar with, but other than that, he's got a very padded resume, I guess you could say. No disrespect to Jesse Butler. I would actually love to see him go out here, get a finish. I would love to see that. I just think that he's really fighting an uphill battle here and taking on now a fighter in Katona that's very motivated to bounce back with a W after losing that last fight. And just Katona is a fighter that's just the better athlete, the better mixed martial artist. And I think that Brad Katona does win this fight pretty easily. I think that the question mark that we can go to, or the question we can go to, is can Katona replicate what Jim Miller did and test that chin and look to put him out there? And I don't really have a lot of faith in Katona doing that. I don't. I think that he'll waste a lot of time on the clock in the clinch, and I could just see him kind of grinding out a decision victory. Okay, so I am going to say that Katona actually wins a decision. And I understand, I mean, if there was ever a time to pick Katona via finish, this is probably it. Maybe he could work some ground and pound or something like that and kind of finish him up like that. But it's just, I can't bank on him. Maybe in the clinch, he postures off, breaks off and lands a big shot and hurts Butler if the chin of Butler is just so diminished from that last finish. And maybe just the overall stage is too much for him, and he feels a big strike land at him, and he kind of curls up in a ball just thinking, oh God, look what's happening again. I'm fighting a big time name in the game, and they're finishing me up. I could see maybe something like that, but I'm not going to bank on that. I'm going to say Katona works his way to an easy unanimous decision. You could minus 500. You could still argue that this is a parlay piece. I know it's a high line, but I've been breaking down the tape on these guys. Not so much in Katona. I know him very much so, but rewatching this newer fighter in Butler, and I'm not impressed with what I see, and I don't really see an avenue of victory for him. In the bantamweight division, we got Cody Stamann taking on Taylor Lapilus. It's kind of crazy, man, when you think like Cody Stamann's now 34 years old. For all you old timers, again, like Cody Stamann was a fighter that really just bursted on the scene, it seems like, to me, right? Because I've been watching the UFC from a long time ago, and when I think about Cody Stamann, I just remember breaking down tape on him as, oh, this is this new fighter fighting out of Michigan that has a wrestling base. His boxing looks sharp. He's a little bowling ball. I mean, this dude kind of reminded me of this fighter. If you guys remember this dude from back in the day, I don't know, kind of like a Brian Bowles, I believe it was, and there was another fighter too, name slipping my mind, but these two dudes, kind of like country American type dudes that had similar fighting styles, good hands, good wrestling. But like if you remember Brian Bowles, and now Cody Stamann's a 34-year-old aging fighter that's been very inactive throughout the years. And listen, nothing but respect towards Cody Stamann's way. I know this is a dude that lost his brother. His brother had some issues. I believe he took his own life, and I know that was obviously very tough for Stamann. I think he took a little bit time away from the game, I believe, around that time. But all in all, he just hasn't been that active. Averaging points of time about a fight a year, two fights a year. I'd say averaging about 2 fights a year. And his last fight was back in 2023. So he comes into this fight almost off another year layoff. He lost to Douglas Silva de Andrade in that last fight. Before that, 2 victories, but against fighters that had big question marks next to their names in Luan Lacerda and Eddie Wineland, an aged Eddie Wineland. Had a couple losses before that, 3 losses in a row before he did handle my lightweight Brian Kelleturd back in 2020, which we do tip the hat to him for that. But all in all, I do have question marks in regards to Cody Stamann. I don't like the fact that Lapilus will have an 8.5-inch reach advantage to go along with having the slicker and smoother overall striking ability. I do like Stamann's boxing, but it's sometimes it's hard for him to close the distance and really tee off with his hands. Lapilus throws some nasty kicks. I've seen him finish some fighters early on in his career with some nasty kicks, some spinning kicks and whatnot. Great footwork. He's a stud athlete. Lapilus is a dude that, as I've been watching some of his more recent fights before he made his return to the UFC, because he did have an initial stint in the UFC and then they parted ways with him, I was scratching my head wondering when the UFC was going to sign him again, because I could tell watching him in the cage that this is a guy that deserved to be fighting in the UFC. All right, so since he made his return to the octagon, his second stint to the UFC, he is 1-1. Went out there and defeated Loughran, who was undefeated at the time, representing Ireland. And Loughran, not the most exciting fighter, but a fighter that showcased in his last fight. He knows how to get the job done. And then after that, bounced back with a loss against Farid Basharat. Now, Farid Basharat, you guys know I'm very high in the Basharat brothers. Farid is the fighter that's still undefeated, even though I'm a little higher on Javid. Javid had a tough fight his last time around, but Farid did have a good amount of control time in that fight. In fact, Farid controlled him down on the mat for about 7 minutes. Okay, so that is a problem. If Stamann wants to look to use the wrestling skills and maybe take him down and try to control him, that could be a potential problem for Lapilus. In the beginning of the Lapilus-Basharat fight, though, I thought Lapilus was looking good with his footwork and kind of avoiding the takedowns. But as the fight progressed, he started to make some mistakes and was taken down. All in all, though, I will say this. I'm not really favoring Stamann having enough success with his wrestling throughout this fight. Stamann is also a fighter that has no problem entertaining a striking type of matchup, and I have a feeling that these guys kind of duke it out. Stamann will look to land his big shot, but I think that Taylor will just be more athletic. He'll have that range, that reach advantage, and I think that he'll outland Stamann. But all in all, I'll also mention that Stamann has been a very durable fighter. He's never been finished via strikes, and I do favor Lapilus winning a decision in this spot. Now, the fight does have the potential to play out closely, but I'm going to side with Lapilus, just taking 2 rounds in solid fashion. I would say convincingly winning 2 rounds where he definitely gets that unanimous decision. I don't know if he wins every round. Maybe there's a round that Stamann kind of steps on the gas a little bit and kind of sneaks one in there. But I'll say that the other 2 rounds, at least Lapilus puts a stamp on those 2, and there's not much of an argument as we go to the judges' scorecards. Okay, so I do like Taylor Lapilus to get the job done via unanimous decision. He opened up on BetUS as a -180 favorite. He's now -190, touched -175, also touched 200, so a little bit up and down. If you're on the Lapilus side, obviously you want to try to get it around -175, 178, if you can catch it, if it goes back that way. Where it is at -190 right now, I don't really have a problem with that, but I would say keep it under -200. I think if you're getting up in the -210, 220 type of range, I think you could be pushing it as far as value goes. And I think that you should be able to catch Taylor under that line. Go shop your sportsbooks, go shop BetUS, and you can grab him at -190 right now. Go lock that in. And I like Taylor there. I think there's some decent value. Now, I know you guys are going to love this fight. Especially you guys out there that just love your high caliber women's MMA fights. We have 2 relatively new faces to the UFC. I know Rayanne Amanda had a stint on Dana White's Contender Series and just made her UFC debut about 5 months ago against Talita Al-Ansar. She lost a very close and controversial split decision there. Puja Tomar, a fighter that's been fighting over at 1FC, was also fighting over at this promotion. I think it was called Matrix Fighting, where she was the champion over there. This is a chick that, I'll say this much, not completely sold on her skill set from the tape that I broke down on her, but I will give her the fact that she's at least an aggressive fighter. She's not a boring fighter to watch, and I think that she's going to go out here and she'll look to close the distance and make this just a fun cat fight against Amanda. Now, as far as how do we see this fight playing out, I will say one avenue that I do see for potential for Amanda to have success in this fight is through her grappling. Tamar is a fighter that I've seen make a lot of mistakes down on the mat, and some of those wild fights that she participated in on the regional scene, or whatever you want to call it over there across the sea. I've seen her throw some sloppy head and arm type of throws where she was kind of giving her back, and I could see Amanda potentially sneaking over to her back and locking in a rear naked choke or something like that. Amanda is a fighter that has had a good amount of submission victories, and we've seen the UFC newcomer coming out of India, Puja Tomar, be submitted a couple of times now as a professional, and fighting some low-level competition as well. So just note that. Now, Amanda, at least you could say in Amanda's case, taking that loss to Talita and Al-Ansar, a high-caliber BJJ player who's came into the sport of MMA, and she's trying to figure out her overall MMA game, but she's a high-caliber athlete. I shouldn't say athlete. She's a professional, okay? If you take a look at her accolades in the BJJ world, she's a fighter that should figure things out and be able to hang around in the UFC. Denise Gomes, we'll be talking about her in a second. I think she's a very talented fighter. That's the fight that she lost on Dana White's Contender Series. She went to a decision with her there. And then after that loss, she went over and grabbed the championship over there, the atomweight championship over in Invicta. And both these fighters have fought in the atomweight division. These are two undersized strawweight fighters. So at least they're both undersized. So it kind of nullifies itself there. Not impressed with what I've seen from either of them on the feet as far as their striking goes. Not really that impressed with Amanda, but maybe I will slightly edge her. Oh, I said it came out again, guys. I edged her to, I will slightly lean her way as having an advantage in the striking department, just based on the fact that I really haven't been too crazy with what I've seen from Tamar. I'll be probably rooting for Tamar to get the job done here. I want to see Indian MMA, MMA coming out of India. I want to see it start to excel a little bit more. So I would, you hear all these, you hear Dana White talk about the fact that there's so many young men in that country. It's a very populated country, and I would love to see it catch on. And I would love to see more fighters fighting at a high level, representing India, fighting in the UFC. I want, you guys know I've been saying that for a long time. I want to see UFC be a global sport where you see high caliber fighters coming out of all parts of the world. And India is one huge country where I think that the level of talent is still pretty low, if you want to be honest about it. So, this girl has the look, and I think that if she was able to have some success, she could potentially bring some notoriety to the sport over there, and maybe somehow that translates to that there being more successful fighters representing the country. But I don't mind watching her fight. I'll tell you that much. And she's aggressive and she's fun too. So sign me up. I'm a fan of Puja Tomar, India's first ever UFC female fighter. Okay, but all in all, I am going to side with Amanda to get the job done here, and actually would not be surprised if Amanda finds a submission in this fight. I think it's some sloppy type of transitions. I could see Amanda maybe sneaking a rear naked choke or an armbar, maybe sneaking off an armbar. I've seen Puja kind of defend armbars. She knows how to kind of roll with that submission and has defended it in the past. But when you kind of look at the fighter she was fighting and how they were throwing it at her, it was kind of lower level. I think Amanda might be able to kind of threaten a little bit more with the sub attacks and maybe actually lock something up and forces Amanda to tap. I know the UFC wants to see her to get the job done here, but all in all, I'll take Rayanne. Amanda, just a little bit more proven, fought a little bit higher level of competition as well. Even the competition that the Puja was fighting over at 1FC and whatnot wasn't that high, and she also did not have a lot of success over at 1FC, where she had a 1-3 record over there. So I won't talk about this fight too much. I know you guys are ready for the next one. But give me Amanda to get the job done with the possibility of her hitting a sub. She is currently right around a minus 250. She's 238, 250 type. There's a type of line like that on her. So she's a hefty favorite. I wouldn't have an overwhelming amount of confidence, and I really wouldn't want to touch her anywhere around the minus 250 range. I'd feel more comfortable catching her more around like 180, which I've seen on some sports books, under 200 if I was to target this fight. But this is not a fight that I'm really looking to target. I'm sitting back and just kind of watching it with a smirk on my face and just seeing the sloppiness take place. For all you big WMMA fans out there, guess what? I got another one for you guys. But I got good news. This is a much high caliber contest compared to the last fight we just talked about. Eduarda Moura taking on Denise Gomes. Let me say that again. Eduarda Moura. I think I hit that pretty good, trying to practice those proper pronunciations for you. That's a name that we're probably going to want to get used to saying, because I think she has quite a bit of potential in this division. You could say the same thing for Denise Gomes as well, just 24 years old. We will definitely be talking about her for a long time to come. When she's 30 years old, I think we'll see a much more refined fighter, and she'll be a fighter that could be hanging around in the top 15. So she comes off a very frustrating loss against Angela Hill. Now, it's one thing to lose to Angela Hill, which we all know Angela Hill is still doing her thing, almost 40 years old, just had another victory even after the Gomes fight. There's no question that she's the real deal, but it's the way that Gomes lost that fight to Angela Hill, where she was controlled down on the mat for over 8 minutes, taken down 55% of the attempts that were thrown her way, taken down 5 times on 9 attempts. That is a little bit of a problem, especially in a matchup here like this, because Eduarda Moura, we could say that one more time for you guys. Eduarda Moura is a fighter that's very well rounded. I like the striking I've seen from her, but she definitely has skills down on the mat. There's no question about that. She has good wrestling. She has good takedowns. And I could see her getting this fight down to the mat and having success down there. Time will tell, but you could almost say that her ground and pound, it could be even more dangerous than Angela Hill's. I mean, you saw what she did in her last fight. She looked pretty damn good down in the mat against Montserrat Ruiz. Of course, that was a low caliber fighter, but still, she looks pretty good down in the mat, especially when you pair that finish there in her UFC debut with the performance that she had on Dana White's Contender Series, where she pulled off the first round submission. I think she shows to have some pretty solid grappling skills. And on the feet, she looks pretty good as well to go along with the size that she has. She's a big girl. She's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage to go along with being just much more rangy in general. She's about 4 inches taller. Maybe she could use some kicks from the outside as well. I think that size advantage will help her in this specific matchup, but as she tries to make a run in this division, I do like the size advantage that she's going to have over the overwhelming amount of fighters in this division. As long as she's making the weight cut properly, she'll use that to her advantage, like she's been doing, as we saw in her last 2 fights. Now she's fighting out of a gym in Brazil that's not as well known as some of the bigger gyms, but she's teamed up with like Gelton Almeida and some of those dudes over there, and that gym is slowly carving out a name for themselves. So she has some talent around her, and I think that her coaches definitely know what they're doing. So we'll see how far she could push it. I do like her in this spot against Denise Gomes, but just also note that Denise Gomes has some serious power as far as this division goes, right? The women's strawweight division. I mean, Denise Gomes came into the UFC and was knocking girls out. That's not something that you typically see. You don't just see girls come in, make their, she lost her UFC debut to Loma Legmumi, but then bounced back with 2 knockout victories, and knockout victories over talented strikers in their own right. Bruna Brazil, and especially in Yasmin Jauregui's case. That's a fighter that I'm very high on. She was able to catch her within 20 seconds and hurt her bad there. So you can't just completely overlook some of the power that she'll present to her opposition. If Moura's not comfortable being hit, we need to see more of her. As far as, can she take it? Can she get tagged with a couple shots and march through? Or does she not like to be hit and start to hesitate in there? And can Gomes start to have success? All in all, I am on the Moura side for sure, and it has a lot to do with her being the more complete mixed martial artist here. I think she could hold her own on the feet and may even get the better of Gomes on the feet, but if she changes levels and uses her wrestling to get this fight down to the mat, I think that she could have success controlling Gomes down there, and she has some pretty powerful ground and pound. We'll see what kind of damage she could do down there. Not necessarily banking on her getting a finish, but Gomes is a little bit of a step up compared to some of the other women that she was just finishing. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to have to give you guys an answer on that in a second. Let's jump over to the betting line, though. Eduarda Moura opened up as a -185 favorite, and the line is going the other way. She touched -155 for a bit, and it's dipped back to -170. So if you like Moura, you're going to be able to get a better line compared to where it opened up at, and maybe it continuously dips down. I like Moura. I like the value on her. I'm hoping that line continues to trend that way, and you shop a nice bargain line on her. I like what I've seen from her. I know Gomes is dangerous there, but I like some of the things we talked about, the size advantage, the overall complete game that she has, the grappling skills, and I think that she has some legitimate potential in this division. We got the young buck, Raul Rosas Jr., just 19 years old, set to take on Ricky Turcios once again. Remember now, this fight was supposed to take place back in February in Mexico. Unfortunately, Raul Rosas Jr. Did catch a case of the dreadful Montezuma's revenge. Word was he was in the toilet for a couple of days there. You cannot fault him for not being able to make the walk. If any of you guys have ever been in a situation like that, I mean, the teller grew up being lactose and not even fully understanding that for years, was cracking open those little milk cartons in elementary school, taking the bus. You guys getting off the bus stop, running back to the house. There was a few times we did not make it all the way inside the house. Used to leave the garage. My parents would leave the garage open. Used to come home to an open house. You know, you hear Rogan always talking about those, whatever you call those key lock type of doors. You know, I grew up first grade, second grade, taking a bus all the way down to MLK Boulevard in Hillsborough and Deerfield Beach, getting off at the bus stop, walking all the way back to the crib. Nobody was ever home, and just would crack the garage. I lived in a big park there on a canal with gators going in the back. It was a fun life growing up as a young buck, but I know there ain't a lot of kids living that lifestyle these days, especially not you new bucks out there. But the point I was making was there was at least 2 times that I didn't make it all the way, and there was a trail following me down the sidewalk to the house because I didn't understand that I shouldn't have been drinking milk every day. But fortunately, that wasn't the case for Raul Rosas. He didn't even make the walk, so we didn't have to see any type of trail following him to the cage. I like this kid, Raul Rosas Jr. If you guys remember, I was on the Ricky Turcios side last time we did the prediction for this fight. I'm still going to stick with my guns here. I'm on Ricky Turcios, and I'll tell you why really quickly because I already did a breakdown on this fight. But I like the reach advantage that Ricky has here, 4-inch reach advantage to go along with the more proven striking. I would say, Ricky's dug deep in some wars and whatnot, and he doesn't have a very powerful type of striking, but he can put out good volume at times. It kind of has like a little bit of a karate martial arts type of striking. He's light on his feet, and we've seen Raul Rosas Jr. struggle a little bit when he's forced to participate in a striking affair. I would definitely say that the grappling is his strength. He can go out there and knock out a dude like Terrence Mitchell. I mean, this guy, Terrence Mitchell, should have never been fighting in the UFC. Let's be very clear there. He got knocked out on The Ultimate Fighter too in devastating fashion. But when Christian Rodriguez forced him to, go the length in a fight and just make it a complete MMA fight, we've seen Raul Rosas Jr. struggle a little bit. He's a little bit of a front runner, but he's only 19 years old, so do understand that. A lot of time for overall growth, and I do believe I want to tip my hat to him because I do believe that he's a very promising fighter, and I am very high on his grappling skills. His jiu-jitsu skills are nasty, and even when it comes to his striking, he has that tenacity in him, and I think that he will refine that and continue to develop that. But I don't really have a lot of faith in him if he cannot get the fight down to the mat and he has to sit there and trade for 15 minutes. I could see the more mature fighter, Ricky Turcios, actually having a little bit more success in that type of a fight. And I have a feeling that Ricky Turcios can keep the fight standing. I think that he may be able to keep this fight standing, and I could see him having success. Ricky Turcios has never been submitted. He has some grappling skills as well. He's a dog. If you guys remember some of the fights he had on The Ultimate Fighter, I mean, this is a fighter that digs deep, and I know he's had some ups and downs. Lost to Aman Sahabi, but Sahabi, he goes out there and he gets some big victories here and there. Now, Ricky did have a victory over Brady Heiston, Ludovic Shalinian, Dan Argueta, a hard-nosed wrestler. You got to go back to his second loss before the Sahabi was a knockout loss he had against Mana Martinez. Lost to Boston Salmon as well. So all 3 losses, 2 recognizable names, and I'm going to side with Ricky here. I am, and I'm definitely going to say that there's more value on his line. I mean, Raul Rosas opened up as a -260 on BetUS. He's now -240. You're talking about being able to get dog value on Ricky as high as +210. He's a +200 currently. I mean, I just think that the value is on him. I think Raul Rosas Jr. is a fighter that's a little bit overhyped based on the fact that he's so young and has had some big performances, but take note who he's doing it against. Take note how he looks when he's fighting a step up in competition. And just don't overlook Ricky Turcios. He's not a slouch. And this is a fight that should start to it should play out a little bit longer. And then we'll see how Raul looks in the later rounds when they're in a complete MMA fight. Hey guys, don't forget, we are powered by BetUS. Sign up through the link in the description of this video. You're going to get a 125% match on your first 3 deposits. Nobody's doing the match bonuses like BetUS. Sign up through the link. Let me know. And I got a gift waiting for you guys as well. Punahele Soriano taking on Miguel Baeza in the welterweight division. Baeza, one of 2 fighters that have some major question marks next to them as they return to the octagon. Of course, we'll be talking about Dominic Reyes in the co-main event. But both these fighters have just been getting devastatingly knocked out as of recently. Both of them took a good amount of time off, which is something you guys know I like. I think that's a very smart move by Baeza. It's been over 2 years, I think, since his last fight where he was knocked out against Andre Fiallo, which is funny enough because Andre, the same thing started to happen with Andre where his chin got completely diminished. It's like almost like it was contagious in the cage there. But Andre found that knockout in the first round. That fight took place back in April of 2022. Okay, so it's been over 2 years. Before that, he was knocked out against K.S. Williams. He was hurt quite a bit in the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight as well. That was a fight where he was really bloodied up and hurt, and maybe that was where we started to see the beginning of the chin and the brain being damaged. And we saw that translate into his 2 later fights. So I do like the fact that he had a long layoff, and there's potential that he could have rebounded. He's still young. He's 31 years old. Maybe we see the chin come back a little bit, at least enough where he's able to showcase his offensive skill set, which is nasty. I'm a big fan of what I've seen from Baeza on the feet throughout the years. When he came off that Dana White's Contender Series win, won that unanimous decision, I was very high on his ability. I like his frame for the division, and he came into the UFC and started to knock dudes out. If you guys forgot about some of the work that he's put in after that fight on Dana White's Contender Series, where he defeated Victor Reina. That was a fun fight. And then he went out there, knocked out Hector Aldana, knocked out Matt Brown, the legend Matt Brown, submitted Takashi Sato. And I think a lot of us were starting to feel that, if you remember at the time, we were starting to feel that there was a little bit of a star being born there. And the brakes got hit. And we'll see in this second little stint, can he start to get things going? I will say that the UFC did and didn't do him a favor with the matchup. Now, they did him a favor in the sense that Soriano has some major question marks in regards to his overall game. He's a fighter that has questionable cardio. He's a little bit sloppy overall. He's a brawler. He's looking to land that big shot. So if Baeza is on his P's and Q's defensively, he could definitely take the smart route in this fight. Maybe slow the pace down a little bit. Try to gas Soriano out. Attack from the outside. Don't really get caught up in too much of a war. Maybe change levels. Use some grappling if he could. But if the UFC didn't do him service in the sense that Soriano is game in the first round, he's going to be throwing straight heat at Baeza's head, and there is a possibility that the chin gets tested once again and it breaks, and Soriano gets a knockout victory here. So I like this fight a lot. Baeza will have a 2-inch reach advantage. He's 3 inches taller. He'll have that range advantage. He really needs to use his footwork and attack from the outside and not get caught up in a brawl, because if he does, I could easily see Soriano knocking him out in this fight, okay? But all in all, I am going to side with Baeza getting that rebound victory. Soriano is just too untrustworthy. Just got submitted by Dustin Stoltzfus, made Stoltzfus look great in that fight. Was knocked out by Kopylov before that, so there's some question marks in regards to Soriano's chin as well. The knockout he had over Dalcha Lingambula, a low-level fighter, and then the Brendan Allen fight, the Nick Maximoff fight. These are fights where we saw issues with the cardio, and I just don't trust his cardio. He's had time to fix that going into some of his past fights, and it just never was the case. He looked to be that same version of himself, and I just don't bank on him having good management with his gas tank and sharpening that up. So I am going to be on Miguel Baeza to get the job done here. Let's go take a look at the betting line where Miguel Baeza is a slight favorite. He's currently a -150 on BetUS, opened up as a -140. So we're seeing some slight action going his way. I would be careful with that as it gets a little higher. Don't put too much confidence in him. We need to see how that chin reacts to a shot. But if you do have faith in that, -140, not a bad line. I like him minus 140. 150, it's getting close. It's an accurate line, so it's getting close. 160, I don't like it. You want to be on a minus 140, 150 down. And for you guys that like a concrete answer here, I like Miguel Baeza to be the more complete mixed martial artist and to go out there and bounce back with a victory inside the cage. And as far as does he get a finish, I'm going to say it's a decision victory for Miguel Baeza, kind of taking over as the rounds go and picking up the volume and taking over the fight. Middleweight action set to take place between Bruno Ferreira and Dustin Stoltzfus. A nice stylistic clash here. Both fighters have solid avenues to go down to get a victory here. Of course, Bruno Ferreira, what he does best is go out there and knock you out in the first round. And we've seen Dustin Stoltzfus be knocked out early in his fights before. And I would say he's lacking a little bit defensively. But some of the things that Dustin does good that he could kind of take advantage of Bruno here is if he can get this fight to go to the later rounds. We've seen that Dustin is, I wouldn't say a complete fighter, but his striking is coming around a little bit with his volume. But he has solid grappling, good cardio, and you have to have a lot more faith in Dustin to get the job done as the fight progresses. If this fight goes to the second and third rounds, I think there's a really good chance we could see Dustin start to exploit Bruno in the later rounds. We could be wrong there. Maybe Bruno looks good in the later rounds. It's hard to have faith in a fighter that's barely ever left the first round and just hasn't been in those types of wars and those grappling exchanges. He's been in a lot of striking affairs where he's clashing and he's either knocking you out, which is happening the vast majority of the time, or once in a blue, or in his case, actually just one time, he's getting clipped with the big shot. If you remember the Nursultan Rosa fight where he got clipped in the first round. But you have to love the way he bounced back after that loss, going out there and doing what he does best once again, knocking Phil Hawes out in the first round. The UFC debut he had against Gregory Rodriguez. Gregory Rodriguez, one of the top tier fighters in the division, an underrated fighter. He goes under the radar, man. Just people don't give Gregory some time, and I think he'll have some bigger fights in the near future where people are really starting to talk about him. But that's a huge UFC debut for him there. Had the devastating knockout finish on Dana White's Contender Series as well. So I am a very big fan of his fighting style. If Bruno is going to be stepping down in the octagon, not that I'm missing any fights, but when Bruno's stepping down in the octagon, I'm going to be glued to the screen. I'm not even looking down to grab a piece of popcorn there. So how do I see this fight playing out? You know, my initial gut is that Bruno's going to catch Dustin early on in this fight. Dustin's just a little bit stiff, and I think that Bruno's going to land the mark. I don't think that Dustin's going to be able to hold up after being hit by the Hulk's attack there. But I will say this, as we're going to slide over to the betting line. I'm not going to go too long on this fight because it's really cut and dry as far as I'm concerned. It's either Bruno's going to clip him early on with the low level or lower level defensive striking skills of Dustin as he's stiff. But if Dustin's able to avoid that shot and the fight progresses, not only does Dustin have the grappling edge for sure, maybe in the gas tank, but his striking, his volume has come around as of recently. I just want to also note the performance that he just had against Punahele Soriano, just kind of looking good in the first round, even at range before setting up that submission. And the Dwight Grant fight too, looked good in that Dwight Grant fight where he was able to get a unanimous decision. I believe it was unanimous. All right, so 32 years old, obviously still getting better. He's not really over the hill right now. He's kind of really a primed fighter. But all in all, I do like Bruno Ferreira to find that knockout finish. But here's the thing. He's a minus 265 favorite right now. I do not like that tag. I would not be targeting that as a two-team parlay. Would not be throwing heavy action on a line like this, like you guys saw me do with the newcomer Sai. You guys saw me throw that 8-unit max on him at a similar line, and then also had him teamed up in another 4-unit play. I mean, essentially I had 12 units on Sai. And I bring that play up not to boast and brag. I bring it up because it's interesting when you analyze a similar line, almost the same line essentially, but this line has so many more question marks in regards to it. That Sai matchup, man, I've been eyeing Sai to make his UFC debut for a while, and I was very familiar with the fighter that took the fight on short notice in George Tuco, and I knew that Sai was going to have the striking advantage, or he could maul him down on the mat, and that fight was so easy. It was a layup. Whereas you get the same line here, but you're banking on Ferreira to land that knockout finish early on, and you have to be on the edge of your seat if he doesn't get it, and he potentially gets exploited late in this fight. So I don't like this line at all. When you have a question mark like that in regards to him, you cannot be tagging this line. I think the value is on Dustin Stoltzfus. I'm not saying I'm sitting here necessarily having the cojones to throw something big on him at plus 215, but the sharp side of myself, the expert side of myself says that the value is on Dustin Stoltzfus at plus 215 and wherever this line goes, because it may continue to trend. There's been no movement yet on BetUS, not a lot of line movement in general, but we may see some more action come in on Bruno Ferreira there. So I like the value on Dustin Stoltzfus, but I got to go with my gut that Ferreira lands that first round knockout. So maybe we'll be talking more about this fight as we get to the prop edition, specific method of victory. Maybe we see some value on a specific method of victory, a first round knockout for Ferreira. Julian Marquez taking on Zachary Reese. In this slot here, I like to call it the co-main event. The fight before the co-main event. This is actually a fun fight. I think it's going to play out entertainingly in the cage. Zachary Reese, still a very intriguing prospect. I know he just got slammed on his head, Thug Rose style, against Cody Brundage, which that victory for Brundage eventually set him up with an opportunity to take on Bo Nickel. Some people feel that he overachieved in that fight, even though he was finished, but that was a huge slam KO on Zach Reese. Zach Reese, though, when you dissect that fight, there's some things that I liked about it and some things I didn't like, of course. The fact that he held on to that sub too long and was slammed on his head is obviously not a good look for him. A little bit of a low IQ move there. But he actually was locking in a triangle there, man. And this is a dude that, for the size that he brings in to this division, is very polished up with his grappling, man. This is a nimble dude down in the mat. He has some nasty sub attacks that he throws off his back. I've seen him. I know he hasn't been fighting the highest level of competition, but this is a dude that really locks in some nasty subs and will put you out. And I love to see that. Now, as far as the striking goes, he has a big frame, nice long frame, has good power. Needs to refine his striking very much so. I would love to see him getting in some work with a dude like this, and Alex Pereira. That would do wonders for his career if he could sharpen up his striking, and then that mixed with his grappling skill set and his athleticism and his frame. I mean, he would be a problem in this division, but I need to see more from him there. Now, luckily for him, though, Julian Marquez isn't a showstopper with his striking. He does carry some big power, but hasn't had a knockout on the feet all the way back in. It was all the way against Phil Haas back in Dana White's Contender Series episode. It might have been the first season. That was back in 2017, where Phil Haas kind of gassed out. It was a war, and then he brutally was knocked out against the cage there. But other than that, Marquez will throw down with you on the feet and has power, but more of a submission fight finisher. Submitted Darren Stewart, Maki Patolo, and Sam Alvey. As far as knockouts go, he's been on the other side of things. The short end of the stick there, getting knocked out against Marc-Andre Barriault and Gregory Rodriguez. So his chin has some question marks around it. Julian Marquez is a fighter that's been very inactive throughout his UFC career. He's a fighter that I'm not really too fond of. I remember back in the day, he had like some little game he was doing on Instagram Live where he'd bring people on, and he kind of, I ended up going on there and talking with him for a bit, but he kind of had like a cocky, snarky attitude. He would kind of just cancel you off the call. In fact, that's what he did to me. He just blocked me off of it. He'd bring people on and then ask you stupid questions, throw you off of it, and kind of a douchey type of dude. At least that's what he seemed like online. He might be really cool in person, but Zachary Reese, on the other hand, from what I've seen from him, seems to be a really cool dude. And even though Zachary Reese is so new, as far as in the UFC world, he's 30 years old. He's not that young. Julian Marquez, 34, just a couple years older, even though he doesn't have a lot more fights. Like I said, he's been very inactive. I like Zachary Reese here. I like Zachary Reese here. He's going to have about a 5.5-inch reach advantage. If he uses his footwork properly and kind of strikes from the outside, he could have some success there. But even though Julian Marquez is a very polished grappler in his own right, I think that Zachary Reese will be the better grappler. I really liked what I've seen from him. And I'm going to actually say that Zachary Reese bounces back with a nice little W here in his second fight in the UFC. I think he's a fighter that really brings in some intangibles and has a lot of promise in this division. So just the fact that he was slammed on his head and knocked out in his UFC debut and made a mistake there, don't completely turn your back on him. he brings in some serious tools to this division and has some potential here. And also note, Julian Marquez comes off 2 knockout losses, 34 years old. He's been so inactive. I mean, where is Julian Marquez's mindset at in regards to the fight game right now? I mean, is this even a guy that really wants to be fighting in the octagon? Whereas Zachary Reese is extremely hungry. And if you don't know, I'm telling you, if you look into him and whatnot, this is a fighter that's very hungry to establish himself as a UFC fighter. He was having a lot of trouble getting matchups on the regional scene. There was guys pulling out of fights. They wanted nothing to do with him. All right, this is a guy that has some serious talent and just has to live up to his ability. And I will side with the younger, hungrier fighter here. And as long as he doesn't make a horrendous mistake here, I think he gets the job done. We take a look at the betting line. Now, he did open up as the slight favorite as a -140 on BetUS, and now this fight is straight up a pick'em fight right now. You could pick either fighter. It's they're -110, -110, and I would rather be on the Zachary side of things, as I stated. Now, when he was a -140, I still probably would have rather been on him even at the -140 line, but if the line would have went the other way, I would have said maybe there's value going against him with some of the question marks that are in regards to his game. And one other big question mark that I have to bring up, I didn't want to gloss over, is that, Zach Reese he's only had 7 professional fights, and every single one of those fights has ended in the first round, win or lose. Okay, so we haven't seen how he's going to look in the later rounds, but I am willing to take a flyer and say that he actually performs well in the later rounds. All right, I think that his jiu-jitsu skills will translate good into the later rounds. He looks to come into his fights in really good shape as well, and I think that he'll actually look good in the later rounds. So time will tell with that. But I like Zach Reese anywhere from -140 and down. I think that you could be getting a decent line on him at pick 'em odds there. Does he finish his fight? I just want to talk about this real quick too. He's been a fight finisher. You take a look at all of his 6 victories. Like I said, all first round finishes. Julian Marquez has been getting finished as of recently. I think he could finish this fight. I think that Zach Reese can finish this fight. The problem is Marquez has never been subbed. Reese is more of a threat to land that sub, but wouldn't be shocked if he actually lands a sloppy overhand as well. Reese does and knocks Marquez out. Man, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Give me Zach Reese to get a finish one way or another. Dominic Reyes makes his return to the cage, still ranked. He's the number 15th ranked light heavyweight fighter, taking on Dustin Jacoby, who doesn't have a rank next to his name. I find that kind of funny because, well, you'll see why in a second when we go with my decision on this fight of how this fight's going to play out. But there's a lot of interesting facts in regards to this fight. Dustin Jacoby's 36 years old, but is so much more of a fresher fighter that has a lot more to give to the game compared to a Reyes who's 34. But the mileage on Reyes' chin has led to his demise, and I don't think even the long layoff that he had is going to help him here. I think he's going to get knocked out. I'll tell you a funny story. In Dominic Reyes' last fight, where he was knocked out once again in that fight against Ryan Spann, before that knocked out against Yuri Prohaska and Jan Blachowicz, high caliber fighters, but the Ryan Spann was a tough one. I went out to the bar and, as I like to do once in a while, and sat next to some dude. I like to chop it up with random people at the bar, and this guy I was talking to was actually a good friend of Dominic Reyes's. I mean, legitimately pulling up pictures of him and all the boys chilling. I think that dude's brother used to play football with Dominic Reyes. Okay, so I think Dominic Reyes, initially from the Northeast, I think he played ball out in the West Coast, but his brother used to play ball with him up in the Northeast, and he was legitimately boys with him. So I'm sitting there getting ready for his fight against Ryan Spann, and Ryan Spann devastatingly knocks him out to make that 3 knockout losses in a row. And his boy was really upset and was telling me how he's going to make a push, and all his boys are going to make a push to never to get him to retire, essentially, to not let him step in the cage again. And that was like the first time that dude wasn't at a fight of Dominic Reyes. He was showing me all the pictures legitimately. He was at every single one of Reyes' fights for years. And that fight, he happened to be where I was for work or whatnot. And that was a tough one. But this is just such a bad stylistic matchup because Dustin Jacoby has some of the most underrated, maybe not even underrated, maybe you guys understand, some of the highest caliber striking in the division. Dustin Jacoby is a fighter that should have had a lot more success than he's had as of recently. Should have had that victory against Alonzo Menefield. I think he still won that fight, even though that one little mistake in that round where he was winning these every round, but then got caught with the big shot and got shaken up, and then they gave the round to Menefield due to damage. But he was really in complete control of that fight for the most part. Should have had that W. Before that, knocked out Kennedy and Sheku. And then the Azamat Mirzakhanov fight too. That was a tough fight from a close one. And then before that, I also had him winning against Khalil Roundtree, as did a lot of people. All right, I thought that he got the bad end of the stick on that decision. And then before that, he was on a huge winning streak. Da Un Jong, Miha Oleksiejczak, John Allen, Darren Stewart. And I do want to mention the Ian Cutelaba fight as well, because that was another fight where he should have had his hand raised. It went to a split decision. He got caught with a big shot early on, but as the fight played out, I mean, he took complete control over that fight style on Cutelaba for the later 2 rounds, but took damage in the first round. I believe he was 10-8'd, right? That's how we went to a draw there, but he was the superior fighter. So just a couple little mistakes. I mean, this is a dude that could be not only ranked, this is a dude that could be fighting in some really big headliner type of fights, eliminators working their way towards a title shot. He could have been that type of dude, and you could really put a lot of fun fights together with Jacoby, with his kickboxing background, of course, the champ, and Alex Pereira. Look side to side here. As both these guys decorated kickboxers. And it's funny too, if you guys forgot, Dustin Jacoby used to fight in the welterweight division, left the sport of MMA, went to the kickboxing world, was fighting over in Glory and fighting up in weight, which suited him much better. And since he came back to MMA, he's been fighting in the light heavyweight division, where I really feel that he's been looking very good. So let me cut to the chase here. I got Dustin Jacoby to knock Dominic Reyes out in the first round. Dustin Jacoby opened up as a -220 on BetUS. He did touch -195. It went under -200, but now it's back to -220. So, and I expect to see that line actually kind of go the other way. I was surprised to see it dip that way. I think Dustin Jacoby is going to settle in like at a -240 favorite. And that's a fight that we definitely will be talking more about in the prop edition video. And we'll be seeing what the line next to his name will be on a first round knockout, to be specific. If you guys are looking to work with me for my official plays, do not hesitate to reach out. Got my IG, my Twitter listed below. Shoot me a message. I'll give you further details. If you don't have either of those, you could email me as well. My email is scrolling below, and shoot me a message. Feel free to say what's up. And even if you're not interested in that, if you have any recommendations for the channel, if you're a graphic designer, if you do video editing, always feel free to reach out to the teller as I'm looking to evolve the channel. Thank you guys. So here we go, boys. We got the main event. The number 4th ranked middleweight fighter in the world, Jared Cannonier, taking on the number 8th ranked middleweight fighter in Nassourdine Imavov. Both fighters at different points in their career, to say the least. Jared Cannonier, great genetics, still in phenomenal shape, but he's 40 years old. You have to just note that. It doesn't seem like he's slowed down as of recently, but still. Imavov, 28, cruising into the prime of his career, has much more to give to the fight game. Jared Cannonier, if he's able to get the job done in this fight, he will be on a 3-fight winning streak. The most previous loss that he had was for the belt against Israel Adesanya. Now, I was very critical on his performance because I just feel that mentally he did not show up for that fight. He was very hesitant throughout that fight, and I thought it was a very disappointing performance because when you get that type of opportunity, you got to at least... you got to at least give it a chance, man. You got to close the distance and look to make it a brawl at the very least. Maybe you get caught with a counter shot from Izzy. I understand he's a sharpshooter, but the route that he went for that fight was not impressive for me. He was very hesitant and just basically accepted the fact that he was going to lose a decision there. And I didn't like that performance at all. Bounced back with 2 solid fights. Victory over Sean Strickland. I thought he lost that fight, but still had a good performance, and it was a very close fight. And then he bounced back with a very solid performance against Marvin Vettori. Ranked middleweight fighters, he's going in there and he's pulling off victories against. So if he can get this victory over Nassourdine Imavov, who's on a little bit of a heater right now, his name will be in the mix. But as I stated in the intro to this video, he's still going to be on the back burner. There's just too much going on in this division right now. But even though this won't give him an immediate title shot, it's still a must win, because if he loses it at this age, at the age he's at right now, I think his aspirations to fight for the belt again will completely be diminished. So Imavov obviously has a lot more time to work his way towards a title shot. He just came up short against Sean Strickland in a 5-round fight. There's been question marks about his cardio and conditioning. If you remember, he showed up, looked great against Buckley in the first 2 rounds and then slowed down, which don't get me started on this dude Buckley, man, because I'm about to start making some videos about him. This dude is ruthless. If you guys saw his most recent post, if you didn't know and you saw what he posted at first, you would have actually thought that Shavkat Rakhmonov died. Did a whole post about him, RIP and all that. I mean, you guys know I'm a wild one. I like all the wild stuff, but he's almost borderline pushing it. And maybe it's just I don't like his attitude and his cockiness, and I'm waiting for someone to sleep him like he was slept against Holland. I want to see that happen again. So, but in that fight, there were some question marks about Imavov's cardio in the later rounds. I think that we could see he's working on that, and he's getting these rounds in. Going 25 minutes with Strickland will do that for you. Going 25 minutes with Dolizé. I mean, we're talking about, and 2 of his last 3 fights, he went 25 minutes. All right, so he's getting in that work, and it's making him a better fighter. And the Chris Curtis fight that went to a no contest due to the headbutt, due to that cut, just note that Imavov was in complete control of that fight and was on way to getting another victory there. So he's been doing his thing, and this is a great fight. You can argue that Cannonier is just gonna, pump the brakes on the clock. You know what I mean? He's just not aging, and he's going to have another solid performance and shows up and he's game, and he takes a decision here against Imavov. I could see that being the case. Has a 2.5-inch reach advantage. Cannonier, a fighter that fought in the heavyweight division, the light heavyweight division, is crazy to think. And I don't overlook Cannonier. Okay, I don't just overlook him. I understand he's a serious fighter, and this is not going to be a walk in the park for Imavov. But I am going to be on the Imavov side of things. I really like his striking. Training with some of the top tier Frenchmen in the game. I like a lot of the striking that I've seen displayed from all of the French fighters, all the top tier French fighters. I mean, they have very sharp striking. Their game overall is coming around, and I just think that Imavov, his footwork will be better. He's very light on his feet, and I think that he'll outpoint Cannonier just a little bit. And I think this is a fight. I think that this is a fight that will go to the final bell. I don't see someone really ending this fight, although, I mean, there'll be plenty of time for something like that to happen. But I think the way that this fight takes place, Imavov does fight kind of a patient, cerebral, tactical type of affair a lot of the times. And I think that he's going to go the route of going for that another 25-minute decision victory where he's just up ahead, scoring points. That's what I see here. So I will take Nassourdine Imavov to win a closely fought, maybe even a split decision, but a closely fought fight. I got Imavov winning the decision there. Let's go take a look at the betting line for the main event bout. Imavov is a slight favorite, very slight favorite. He's a -125. The comeback on Cannonier is -105. Slight lean on Imavov. And so, I mean, really, whoever you'd like to win this fight, essentially, you're at that point where you could say, the line's not steering you away one way or another. I will say I like Imavov to win this fight, but I'm not crazy about him in this spot. This could be a tough test for him. Cannonier is the real deal. If you want to do a little bit of fight math, Cannonier somehow got the nod against Strickland in a close fight. Strickland was able to handle Imavov in that 25-minute fight. This is a fight that should play out very closely, but I'll say Imavov with his youthfulness and his continuous growth and his skill set as he's young, he'll just be a little bit of a fresher fighter ready for this occasion. As Cannonier, you would think, would start to show some signs of slowing down, but I don't know about that, man. Dude's a freak. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up UFC Louisville. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Appreciate all you guys that like this video, that subscribed and or caught me on social media. It really does mean a lot to me, as I'm always putting in a lot of work behind the scenes over here, probably a lot more than you guys realize. Some of you guys probably do realize, but I appreciate all you guys. Just that little bit of help goes a long way for me. Leave you guys with some parting words, something else thinking about. I'm exhausted too. We've been on the mic for a bit, but take this into consideration. Say you're going on a vacation or something, right? Which is great if you're able to pull that off once in a while. It's great for the mind, but understand that your mindset, it carries even more weight than the destination that you're going to, right? So you could be going on a vacation to somewhere awesome, but if your mind is not correct and you're not in a vacation mindset, which I'll elaborate a little bit more on, what's worth more? You could be going right down the street, and if your mind is more in a positive way, and you're really just looking at the brighter side of things, and you're enjoying all the little things, you're more on a vacation there than if you're getting caught up and all the small things and getting stressed out about all these stupid small things, and you're traveling to these places, you're getting there, it's the whole thing, you're not even taking it all in, which I'm not saying not to travel, you should be traveling, but more importantly, get your mind right, enjoy all the different stages of life and all the steps you're taking. Get yourself in a position to go on vacations, get your money right, but make sure you're in that vacation mindset even before you're at your destination. Make sure you're in that vacation mindset just in your daily life. And then as you go on that trip, make sure you're in a state of mind where you're at peace and you're enjoying life. And there's ways you could do that, and we could talk more about that another time, but make sure you're at a good point in your life at all times. Just do what you got to do to weather the storm, whatever storms come your way, embrace them, and always understand that the glass is half full. All right, guys, I'll leave you with that. Hope you all have a profitable event. Reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, comment under my post. I'll meet you there. We'll conversate and talk all things MMA and all things UFC Louisville. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.